Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to explain how the cardiac cycle works. There's a few things we're going to learn about in this video, and the first thing, some definitions of some key terms. We're also going to learn about how the contraction of the heart is coordinated, and there's 4 sets of nerves within the heart that do that. We're going to learn that the heart is myogenic, a bit more about that later, and we'll also learn what an ECG trace is. So first of all, we're going to define 2 words, and they're not spelt how you say them. Looks like systole, it's actually systole. So systole means contraction. And another word you might not have heard before, diastole, means relaxation. So systole means contraction, and as you already know, the heart has 4 chambers. It's got 2 atria, left and right, and 2 ventricles, left and right. And how the heart works is the 2 atria contract, then the 2 ventricles contract, and then the whole heart relaxes. So the events of one cardiac cycle, which doesn't take very long, would be atrial systole, followed by ventricular systole, followed by diastole, where the whole heart relaxes. So you've got atrial systole, ventricular systole, and the whole heart relaxes, diastole. And I hope that's clear. If you need to pause just to get those definitions, then you can. One more word we're going to define is this one here. The heart is myogenic. And what myogenic means is that the signal for the heart to contract comes from within the heart itself. I'll say that again because it's important. The signal for the heart to contract comes from within the heart itself. So there are 4 sets of nerves. Within the heart. They are the SA node, the AV node, the bundle of His, and these things, the Purkinje fibers. And the SA node is like the pacemaker of the heart. The AV node, that allows for a short pause and coordinates heart contraction. The bundle of His goes down the septum. Actually, it's important to say that it goes down the septum, and the Purkinje fibers, they run up the walls of the ventricles. So they're the 4 sets of nerves which control the myogenic contraction of the heart. So the signal for the heart to contract comes from inside the heart. It can contract without any external stimuli. It just needs these 4 sets of nerves. And of particular importance, you've got the SA node, which sends out a regular signal. One thing I'm not going to talk about in this video is how heart rate and force of contraction can be externally modified by nerves and hormones. You'll have to wait for that one. So whereabouts are these things in the heart? Well, I've got a picture here of the heart ready, drawn out. And you'll be familiar with some of it, hopefully. So, a few labels before we start. We've got, let me get this right, this is the left side of the heart. This is the right side of the heart. I'm actually not sure how that's going to turn out on the screen, but it's definitely right. This is my right hand I'm writing with, but it's the left side of the heart. You can see the thick ventricular wall there. So this would be the left atrium. This is just a recap. You already know this, hopefully. This would be the left ventricle. This would therefore be the right ventricle. And then this would be the right atrium. And these things contract, atria, then ventricles, then relax. Atria, then ventricles, then relax. Just notice a quick thing about this diagram. It's missing some semilunar valves. Let's just add them in there. Because if I get time, I'll go on and talk about heart sounds. So we've got the atrioventricular valves here, and then the semilunar valves in the arteries there. And again, a bit of recap. We do this in order. Blood enters the heart here via the vena cava. Enters the heart here via the vena cava. I don't want to put too much of this ink on here for reasons I'll go into. Then when the atria contract, it goes down there into the right ventricle and then up and exits the heart to go towards the lungs. Then when it comes back from the lungs, it's oxygenated, comes back here into the pulmonary vein, into the left atrium, into the left ventricle, and then up out of the aorta. But that you really need to know already before we start this. That's the basic anatomy of the heart. There are other videos about that, and you should look that up before you start this one. Because we're here to talk about those 4 different sets of nerves which cause the cardiac cycle to take place, and they are located here. That, in the wall of the right atrium, is the SA node. The AV node is in the middle of the heart. It's called the atrioventricular node. The SA node stands for sinoatrial node. Then you've got the bundle of His that runs down the septum. There it is. And then you've got this Purkinje fibers, and they run up the walls of the ventricles, and they cause the ventricles to contract from the base upwards. So the SA node is sending out the signal to tell the heart to contract, 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 contract. That causes the atria to contract, and so the signal will spread throughout the walls of the atria, and the atria will squeeze the blood down into the ventricles. That signal is then picked up by the AV node in the middle of the heart. There's a short pause, and that pause allows the ventricles to fill with blood. Then the signal travels down this bundle of His to the base of the ventricles, and that's important. It doesn't travel really that fast. These nerve fibers are quite specialized. Unlike motor neurons, the signal doesn't travel really fast down them. It just reaches the base of the heart, and then the Purkinje fibers, which looks like I've forgotten to label, they allow the heart to contract from the base upwards. So the ventricles contract in this way and they squeeze the blood upwards out of the two arteries, the aorta and the pulmonary artery. So these are electrical signals. The SA node sending out its rhythmical signal there that causes atrial systole, and then the signal's picked up by the AV node. There's a short pause to allow the ventricles to fill with blood. The signal goes down the septum, down the bundle of His, and then up these Purkinje fibers. The ventricles contract from the base upwards, and the blood exits the heart. One thing that I missed out in the previous explanation is, at that point, the whole heart relaxes. That's where you've got diastole, sorry, and that means that the chambers can fill with blood again. And only after that do the atria contract, ventricles contract, diastole. Atrial systole, ventricular systole, diastole. Right, moving on from that. So how is all of this studied? Well, the answer is it's studied by using an ECG. And an ECG is time and electrical activity. And what you get is this. You get a small hump there, then a large spike, and then a slightly larger hump. And if you remember what those events were that we just talked about, those events of atrial systole, ventricular systole, and then diastole, you can see what an ECG trace means, because this here corresponds with atrial systole. This big spike here corresponds with ventricular systole. That looks like the main event. And then this hump here, that corresponds with diastole. That's the heart relaxing and filling with blood. And you've got names for these. This is the P wave. This is the QRS complex. That's ventricular systole. And this is the R wave, where the heart is filling with blood. There's a few things you can tell from an ECG. If all of the peaks are very close together, then that person's heart is beating very, very fast. If they're far apart, then the heart's beating slowly. And you can tell other things as well from an ECG. There are other videos. If you go on to study medicine, you can study about ECG analysis. There are tons of those already on the internet. The last thing that we're going to talk about is vowel sounds. How this corresponds with vowel sounds. I'm just going to do a very quick sketch of the heart. See if I get this right. This is a schematic diagram of the heart. I've already got it wrong. Should I start again or just go with it? I've missed out these bits here. Anyway, so this is a schematic diagram of the heart. And another recap. Vena cava, blood comes in there. The mistake I've made is this. I'm just going to leave it in, not get too hung up about it, he says. So it's the same diagram as we had before, but it's schematic, so means I can draw it. And these valves are important in heart sound. So you've got these atrioventricular valves, and then these semilunar valves. Now, they correspond to different things. Atrial systole doesn't have a valve sound associated with it. So that's happened first, because valves are opening. The sounds that we hear when the heart beats, the lub-dub, da-dum, 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 that you can hear for a typical heartbeat, they happen when valves close, not open. So atrial systole doesn't have a sound. The first and louder sound corresponds with ventricular systole, and that's these valves here snapping shut when the ventricles contract. So the ventricles contract, the walls contract forcefully, forcing those valves shut, and that's the first heart sound, the AV valve shutting, or lub, as it's sometimes called. Then the blood exits the heart. These valves don't make a sound, but when the heart relaxes during diastole, then this blood here would flow backwards into the heart if these valves didn't shut. So the valve sounds go like this. Atrial systole, no valve sounds. Ventricular systole, big valve sound, AV valve shutting. And then diastole, the slightly smaller valve sound, and that is when the heart's relaxing and the semilunar valves shut to prevent backflow. And that's pretty much all for today. Let's just have a quick recap. So we've learned a few definitions. Systole means contraction, diastole means relaxation. One cardiac cycle, it takes about 0.8 of a second, it's taken me longer to explain it than it does to occur, is atrial systole, ventricular systole, and then diastole. The four sets of nerves that control that are the SA node, the AV node, the bundle of His, and the Purkinje fibers. And they are located in the wall of the right atrium, and that pacemaker causes atrial systole, picked up by the AV node, down the bundle of His, and then the ventricles contract from the base upwards. That's ventricular systole, and then finally the heart relaxes and you've got diastole. Few terms there. If someone's asystolic, it means that the heart is not contraction. The ECG wouldn't look very good. If somebody is in VF, or ventricular fibrillation, that means the ventricles are doing this. They're like not contracting, and they're not forcing blood around the body effectively. And what ventricular fibrillation can be prevented by or stopped by is that's what you use a defibrillator for. That's what the word means. And so these ECG tracers can tell medical professionals if you're asystolic or if you're in VF, and they all link back to the cardiac cycle. Thanks for watching. In the next video, I'm going to explain how the force of contraction and the heart rate is controlled by external stimuli such as nerves and hormones.